Mr. Chairman, you're free to proceed.
Thank you, Max. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the August 24th, 2020 meeting of the Board of Adjustment. Today, we will be holding our second virtual meeting, so please bear with us as we deal with technical glitches and learn to get used to this format. Again, I want to thank our city staffers, in particular Max Hamby and Ann Womack, for their assistance in setting up this format, and for Max in particular, serving as our chaperone for our virtual meeting today. I also want to take the opportunity to introduce our newest board member, Randy Mason. Randy, I know you're online. I can't see your face, but welcome aboard. And I'm going to advise everyone that Randy will not be participating in the hearing today, as he was just appointed to the board and hasn't had the opportunity to prepare for this hearing. But I'm glad he's on board to observe and find out a little more about how we do things here. So let's go through the roll call, and I can just look at the screen and see that Barry is here, and Walt, and Lou, and Randy. I can't see you, but if you're here, can you say here?
I think I'm muted, but I'm here. Yes.
Okay, we can hear you. So there we are. So we have all 5 members of the board are here today. Next, we're going to go to Ann. Ann, are you available? Can you hear me?
I'm here.
Okay. Ann, I'm going to ask you to tell us how the meeting notices were posted in this case.
The agenda for the Board of Adjustment regular meeting was posted in City Hall and on the city portal on August 17th. The agenda notice was sent out from the portal on August 17th. The public notice for case number 1019-09 for the property located at Lot 1A East Lake Drive and Prospect Street was posted in City Hall and on the city portal on July 29th. The public notice was published in the Cape Gazette on August 4th and August 7th, Coast Press on August 12th, and Delaware State News on August 6th and 7th. Notification specific to this case was mailed out to property owner addresses within 200 feet of the subject property, and signage was posted on the property. That's all I have, Chairman.
Okay, sounds like everything was done appropriately, and I think we're ready to continue going forward with this. Are all the parties present? Mr. Mandalis, I see you're there, and Matt, so you guys are going to be representing the city today, I gather. How about from the applicant's point of view? Who's here for the applicant?
For the applicant, we have David Hutt, who has the applicants here with him. And then Doug Warner, a professional engineer, is also available should we need him.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hutt. Ann, can you tell me if any general correspondence has been received?
There's no general correspondence, only correspondence specific to the case.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to the minutes of the last meeting. Ann circulated a copy of the minutes earlier today. I hope you've all had the opportunity to review them. And if you have had the chance to review them, are there any comments, or are we prepared to just have the motions move to approve the minutes?
I make a motion, Jerry, to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Right. The minutes are approved unanimously. Old business. Is there any old business, Ann?
No, there is not.
Okay, I'd like to mention that I'll use this opportunity to ask that if anyone, if everyone has had the opportunity to review the decisions in our last 2 cases from the last meeting, and if so, you could authorize Ann to sign your name to the decisions. I've already done that by email. I believe Lou has, and Barry. So Walt, if you haven't had the opportunity to do that, you can send Ann an email advising her that she's authorized to sign your name. Is that okay? Okay. And then for new business, and the new business tonight is the one, this afternoon is the one hearing we have for Lot 1A. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, well then let me introduce the case and we'll get the ball rolling. This afternoon, the Board of Adjustment will consider one case, that of Lot 1A on the corner of East Lake Drive and Prospect Street. This particular lot is an odd shape, which is currently undeveloped. The applicant is seeking a variance from the setback requirements of the code to allow them to have a 10-foot rear yard setback and a 10-foot front yard setback instead of the 15-foot setbacks provided for in the code. This type of variance being sought is what is called an area variance. Under Delaware law, the factors that the board must use in evaluating a request for an area variance are these: the nature of the zone where the property lies, the character and uses of the immediate vicinity, whether removal of the restriction on the applicant's property would seriously affect the neighboring properties and their uses, and finally, whether failure to remove the restriction would create exceptional practical difficulty for the owner in relation to the owner's efforts to develop the property. According to case law, this standard is satisfied only when the difficulties alleged by the applicant are practical rather than theoretical and exceptional rather than routine. We welcome the members of the public who may be watching online and taking an interest in the work that we do here. Those of you who have signed up to speak will be given the opportunity. Please note that we do have a court reporter present. For her to do her job, it is important that she be able to hear what each speaker says. So please keep your voices up and no cross conversation during the hearing. Everyone who chooses to speak here this afternoon will be required to give testimony on the road. Thanks for your attention to these remarks, and we're now ready to begin hearing the case. So with that, let's turn to the building inspector to give his report. Matt, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon and long time no see, guys. Welcome back. Good afternoon to the members of the board, the commissioner, or the public and city staff. Before you today is application number 1019-09. The applicants are Bradley and Kathleen Rosansky, residing at 4825 Montgomery Lane, number 301 in Bethesda, Maryland, 20814. The owners being the same. The location is Lot 1A, Block 31, East Lake Drive, Prospect Street in our lovely Rehoboth Beach. The nature of the request is Mr. and Mrs. Rosansky seek variances to the City of Rehoboth Beach zoning ordinances 270-24 and 270-25, regulating the minimum required amount of setback from 15 feet to 10 feet in both the front and rear setback requirements. The lot is located at the intersection of Prospect Street, East Lake Drive in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. The Sussex County tax map number is 334-20.06-108.00. The recommendation from the Building and Licensing is that Building and Licensing staff has reviewed the application presented and has determined that if the permission were granted for the setback encroachment, the allowance would not offer any major addition of buildable square footage, and a designer architect should have no problem designing the residence to conform to the existing setback requirements. Nature of the zone where the property lies. The subject is in zoned R1 residential district. The required setbacks for a typical property in this district are as follows. The front would be 15, the rear would be 15, and the sides are a 6-foot minimum on side and it's with a 16-foot aggregate. Of note, this property is located in a FEMA Zone AE, elevation 9. This FEMA zoning does not make substantial impact on the design or construction of a proposed residence here. The character and use of the immediate vicinity. The lot is situated at the end of Prospect Street where East Lake Drive intersects. The surrounding area is comprised mostly of all of residential dwellings, and all of the parcels are zoned R1. Implications of approving the variance request. The allowance of an encroachment of the front and rear setbacks from the original would allow for a more robust house being built on the lot. The lot with its current setback requirements is not an undesignable lot. While it might not be exactly to the wishes of the owner, a house could easily be designed to honor the intent of the code. Whether denial of variance would create unnecessary hardship or exceptional practical difficulty for the owner in relation to the owner's efforts to make normal improvements to the property. The denial of the variance would not create undue hardship, because the lot can still be designed to honor the ordinances set forth in the building inspector's opinion.
Okay. You know what I forgot to do, Matt? We're going to swear all the witnesses. I didn't swear you. So is it, do you affirm that the testimony you gave and you will continue to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir, I do.
All right, thank you. So that concludes your report, I gather. We're going to turn the floor over to Mr. Hutt now, and then we will open it up for questions from the members of the board. Mr. Hutt, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Capone. And again, thank you to the board and to the city and its staff for putting together this virtual meeting for us this afternoon. For the record, my name is David Hutt. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Morris James. And this afternoon, I am representing Brad and Kathy Rosansky, who are the owners of this property and the applicant. The Rosanskys are present with me here in my office. I think you can probably see Brad Rosansky on the camera. He's sitting an appropriate distance from me with his mask on this afternoon. And Kathy Rosansky, I believe, is off camera, but she is certainly available if any members of the board may have any questions as we move forward. Another part of our team who's not in the same room as myself and the Rosanskys is Doug Warner. He's a professional engineer with Element Design Group. And again, if there's any questions specific to him, he is on this call and would be able to answer any questions that the board may put to him as well. As you have seen in the materials and as was just introduced by Mr. Capone, this is a rare lot in the city of Rehoboth Beach, as it exceeds the minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet with which everyone is familiar, yet its building envelope is smaller than a typical 5,000 square foot lot, and that's due to its irregular trapezoidal shape. As you will hear this afternoon, and as I was thinking about obviously this presentation, I was trying to think of how best to describe it for the board members and the members of the public who are listening. And I think that the best expression that fit this that I came up with was that it's a lot that's too big to be small and too small to be big. When you try to consider all those various factors, as you'll see, it creates the exceptional practical difficulties that form the basis of the Rosanskys' variance request this afternoon. One thing I wanted to make clear from the outset, I think there has been some confusion on this, and I wanted to state two things about what this application is not this afternoon. First, this is not an application seeking to build a larger home or a bigger home on this lot. The city's FAR will be followed. There is not an application this afternoon to adjust the FAR, to do anything to the FAR. So this is not an application where the applicant is saying, we need a bigger home. Similarly, this is not an application where the applicant seeks to exceed the city's lot coverage requirements. Those two building requirements are not part of today's application, and nor do the Rosanskys intend to seek any relief now or in the future regarding the requirements of the town zoning code. Instead, the application this afternoon seeks to allow a variance in the setbacks that present practical difficulties in the normal building of a home on this parcel. The board has already heard Mr. Capone's comments as well as those of Mr. Janis, the building official representative this afternoon, and they have accurately described the basic features of this lot. We'll obviously take a different position than the building official in a few minutes, but the basic features and fundamental elements of this lot is biographical data, for lack of a better term, is correct, in that the lot in the city is in its R1 zoning district. The lot contains 5,756 square feet of area. And as noted already by Mr. Janis, the setbacks in the R1 district for this area are described in sections 270-24, 25, and 26 of the zoning code. And as you heard a moment ago, they are 15 feet in the front and the rear, and 16-foot aggregate for the side yards with a 6-foot minimum. This lot has additional unique features that make the practical application of those setbacks much more difficult to apply to this lot. If you look at the online packet materials for both the board members and of course any members of the public who are listening, if you look at page 18 of those packet materials, you will see a survey, a boundary survey of this lot. The following pages, 19 to 21, also contain the same survey, and we'll go through those in a minute. But the first difficulty and unique feature of this lot, it comes from section 270-26, and it's in the footnote of that. And because this lot is wider than 52.5 feet and the area within the lot is greater than 5,000 square feet, the side yards are not 16 feet, but instead there's a mathematical calculation that has to be undertaken in order to determine what the side yard setbacks are. For this lot, Mr. Warner, who I mentioned a moment ago, was the Rosansky's engineer. He confirmed through Mr. Janis with the building official's office that the aggregate for this lot is 18.4 feet. And so if you look at the survey that's at page 18 of your packet materials, you'll see that on Prospect Street, which is actually a side yard setback as it's considered, and we'll talk about that in a minute, that setback is 10 feet. And then you'll see towards the top of the survey, which is actually the southern end of the parcel, a setback of 8.4 feet. So as you can see, this lot already has a greater side yard setbacks due to footnote 2 of section 270-26. The second unique aspect of this, as compared to your typical lot in Rehoboth, is also found in that footnote 2 of section 270-26. And unlike most lot owners who can decide which side the minimum 6-foot yard side setback is going to be placed, the Rosanskys do not have a choice on that because the code says that the Prospect Street side has to be chosen and has to be a minimum of 10 feet because it is a corner lot. Of course, as it was introduced, it sits at the corner of Prospect Street and East Lake Drive. So this, while it looks like the lot, this Prospect Street frontage is being treated as a side yard, it is actually being treated as a corner front yard. Again, it's a unique feature of this lot, and that is also confirmed in the notes section in section 270-24 of the Rehoboth Beach Code. Again, those are all things that the building official has verified. Those are the setbacks that apply to this lot. One question that you may be asking yourself is the third sort of unique difficulty that exists for this lot, and that is, why is East Lake Drive considered the front of this parcel? The answer to that question lies in the definition section of your zoning code, section 270-4. And that states that when you have a corner lot, a lot that fronts on two streets, the front that is the shorter of the two, or the side rather that is the shorter of those two sides, becomes your front. And so in this case, the odd shape of the lot means that the Prospect Street side is 2.39 feet longer than the East Lake Drive side. And so East Lake Drive becomes the quote unquote front of this property. Of course, that makes perfect sense on a traditional 50 by 100 lot in Rehoboth Beach, because the 50 feet is on almost every other lot in Rehoboth is this part that abuts the street. And then the 100 feet is the depth of the lot as you move away from the street. So it makes sense that the code reflects that the shorter of the sides would be the front of the lot. And again, in this case, it's a 2.39 foot difference, the difference between 101.8 feet and 104.2 feet. But what this means, of course, is that the front of the lot is on East Lake Drive. And as you can see on the survey, that is a 15-foot front yard setback. And then you correspondingly have a 15-foot rear yard setback on what, for most lots, almost all lots in Rehoboth Beach, would be a side yard setback between this lot and, of course, the neighboring or adjacent lot on Prospect Street. The fourth practical difficulty is that the lot without the variance request has a buildable area that is less than the buildable area of a conventional 50 by 100 lot. When you do the raw math on a conventional 50 by 100 rectangular lot, the buildable area is 2,380 square feet. And you calculate that by taking away the front and rear yard setbacks, and you take 100 minus 15 for each of those, so 30, you have 70 by 34, which is the math when you subtract 16 feet for the side yard setbacks from 50 feet. And 70 by 34 is 2,380 square feet. And this lot does not have within its boundaries 2,380 square feet because of the application of the setbacks. The buildable area on this lot is 2,294 square feet, which means that it is missing 86 square feet if it was a traditional lot. Again, that is part of my observation at the outset of why this lot, I refer to it as being too big to be small, but too small to be big. It's very unusual that a lot that is a little oversized has a undersized building footprint, undersized by your standard 50 by 100 lot. And the difference that this makes on the property, Mr. Warner with Element was kind enough to put together, if you look at the pages that followed that 18, or if you look at page 19 and then 20 and 21, 19 shows in the yellow shaded area a lot with the setbacks that are set forth in the city code. You'll see the 15-foot front and rear yard setbacks. And page 20 shows with the requested relief by these variance requests, and that's a 10-foot front and rear yard setback. So you can see the 10-foot along East Lake Drive, and then the 10-foot between this property and the next adjacent property on Prospect Street. Page 21 probably shows it the clearest, and that, of course, combines all of that information. And you can see the cross-hatching on that plot or survey that shows the setback area that is being sought for the additional setback area that's being sought with this application. The fifth difficulty with this lot is that it does not meet the minimum requirements under today's code, which would require, of course, a 50-foot wide lot. And you can see there is not 50 feet at the property boundary between this lot and the next lot over to the south on East Lake Drive. But more significantly is that the Rehoboth Code requires that a lot have a 4,000, be designed in such a way that it have a 4,000 square foot rectangle within its parameters. And that's found in section 270-22, and that's a requirement for new lots. And I would note that that would mean that this lot could not be recreated today if someone were trying to lay out a new subdivision within the R1 zoning district in the city of Rehoboth Beach. What that code says, and the significance of that, is the code says even if you were going to have an irregular shaped lot such as this lot, you would still have to have a minimum 4,000 square foot rectangular shaped box that would fit within the lot. And that code section, you can see the wisdom of that based on this application, as it would mean that you couldn't have a lot that was a little oversized as far as square footage, but undersized with a smaller building envelope. If you had that minimum 4,000 square foot rectangular box, that would, of course, allow for the setbacks and a very traditional development and design through the Rehoboth Beach zoning code. As was described by Mr. Capone, pursuant to section 270-74 of the city's code, the board has the authority to grant variances. And in the city's code, it talks about that a variance shouldn't be contrary to the public interest, and that it should be granted if it's granted, it should be due to special conditions, exceptional situations where a literal interpretation results in an exceptional practical difficulty, so that the spirit of the ordinance can still be observed and substantial justice done, and that substantial justice should not impair the intent and purpose of the zoning code. As this is an area variance, and Mr. Capone spoke about that again at the outset, but this is the less burdensome of the test for variances. There's two types of variances, a use variance and an area variance. A use variance has an unnecessary hardship standard. which is the more difficult standard. The less burdensome test is an area variance, which is exceptional practical difficulties. In short, what the zoning code and then the case law through what we all know as the quick check test has developed around this law is that there are 4 factors in evaluating a variance request. And the 4 factors set forth in that test are exactly as Mr. Capone introduced them, and then Mr. Janis's report identified and went through those. But the first of those factors is the nature of the zone in which the property lies. As was noted, this property does lie in the R1 residential district, and the purpose of this zone is to be developed primarily with single-family detached dwellings, which of course is the proposed use for this lot. Again, I want to reiterate at this point that this is not an application for a bigger house. It's an application so that the lot can be designed without the difficulties that are being presented by the nature of the angular shapes on the lot, as well as the reduced buildable area within the lot. The second factor under the quick check test is the character and uses of the immediate vicinity. I think everybody here is probably familiar with the character and uses of the immediate area, which is that they are residential homes with the same zoning classification, the same R1 zoning district, and this matches what is sought by the applicants as they seek to construct a home on this site. If anybody was not familiar with the site, there are pages in the package materials that are online and that were submitted to the board, and those are found at pages 22 to 27. There are various views that show the street views and the streetscape and the sight lines of this relatively quiet area within the city of Rehoboth Beach. The third factor is whether removal of the restriction on the applicant's property would seriously affect the neighboring properties and their uses. And the adjacent properties are already developed, largely developed with single-family homes, typical of this area of Rehoboth Beach. It is important when you think about this to think of that this is a corner lot. As we already noted, some of the special requirements that the zoning code has for corner lots. But the 2 most impacted lots would, of course, be the neighbor on the adjacent neighbor on East Lake Drive, and of course the adjacent property on Prospect Street. No neighbors in a Rehoboth Beach R1 zoning district have any expectation that there is going to be a 25-foot separation distance between their home and the home adjacent to them on their side. And the reason for that is, of course, that the zoning code has a 16-foot side yard setback, and a person either has an expectation that there's going to be 6 feet between them and their neighbor, or 10 feet. Of course, it would be the other option, as one of them is going to be 10. And typically in Rehoboth, that's where you find the driveway for the property and where people park. In this case, the requested relief, of course, would put that at that and would meet that expectation, as you'd have a 10-foot side yard setback, and that is where the driveway is likely to occur. And so the lot that is adjacent to this on Prospect Street would have the same as if this lot had a front on Prospect Street. And again, it's 2.3 feet short of having a front on Prospect Street. The uses of the adjacent properties, again, are identical, and their uses would not be affected. In the materials that were submitted online, there is a view shed that was prepared by Mr. Warner, and you can see that there is shows the difference between a 10-foot setback, and that's at page 10 of your package material, sorry. He shows the difference between rather the 10-foot setback and the 15 setback, which shows basically a 5-degree difference. And again, you'd have to be elevated, and there's a whole lot of other factors that go into that. But as you can see, the view shed is not impacted, and people could plant trees or obviously build to the city's height limitation. And so these would not, there is not a negative impact on the adjacent properties, and it meets the expectations of those side yard setbacks. The fourth factor, as is set forth in the quick check test itself, as the courts have stated it, is whether failure to remove the restriction results in an exceptional practical difficulty for the owner to make normal improvements in the character of the use of the property. This standard and how it's stated right there is a great description of exactly what is occurring with this property. The property owner is trying to make the most normal improvement possible in the R1 zoning district, which is the addition of a single family home. But because they're building that home in the district and the shape of the lot and then the resulting buildable area within that lot, that process is made exceptionally difficult. You've heard from the building official, and he read into the record his report this afternoon, and we disagree with it for a couple of reasons. Two in particular, and again, I want to begin, I think I say this every time I'm in front of this board, this is not an attack on the building official, whether it be Mr. Janis this afternoon or Mr. Molina, as they have worked with us throughout this process. They've met with the Rosanskis, and as I have verified setbacks, and we've been working with them. The 2 points of disagreement are found in page 13 of your packet. And if you look at page 13, you will see that in the third factor regarding the implications, what they call implications of approving the variance request, there's a description in there that the requested variance will allow for, and I'm going to quote, a more robust house. I'm not exactly sure what a more robust house is, but our point of disagreement on that would be that the Rosanskis are not seeking a bigger house. There is no attempt here to create a bigger house or one that exceeds the coverage. And I began the presentation by saying that I wanted to make sure that that's clear, that that is not the goal of this application. Instead, the variance relief that is sought would allow normal improvements to be designed and constructed without trying to fit something into the narrow areas that are created by this irregular lot. Again, there's no FAR or lot coverage relief that's being sought. In the package materials, there were at the last 4 pages, which begins at page 28 and extends through 31, there were images and initial designs that the Rosanskis had prepared some time ago. And what those show, those are not what is planned to be built now. Those are just examples of homes that fit that lot's floor area ratio as well as their coverage. If the variance were granted, or if the front and rear yard setbacks were both 10 feet. Again, that is not a design that is actually what they have sought a building permit for. If you went to and asked Mr. Janis, he would say they have not seen those plans for a building permit. The second disagreement with the building official's report is similarly on page 13 of the package materials. And it appears as though the wrong test is being applied to this variance application. The very last sentence of the building official's report states that the denial of the variance would not create undue hardship because the lot can still be designed to honor the ordinances set forth. An undue hardship is not the standard for an area variance. This standard for an area variance is exceptional practical difficulty, as was noted in Mr. Capone's opening comments and as I noted a moment ago. The balancing of these factors, as is required by the test, shows that there is minimal, if any, harm to the neighbors as their expectations regarding setbacks for side yards will be met. And instead, it shows that the harm here is to the Rosanskis, who end up with an oversized lot that has an undersized and difficult building envelope for all the reasons that have been discussed by me in the last few minutes. There's certainly no long-term harm done to the city's code, as the lot could not be newly created today. And I would guess that this might be the only lot in the city where you have this perfect storm of application of these setbacks to a slightly oversized lot. Again, it's the unique application, and I went through each of those factors or the application of those to these corner lot features that resulted in a reduced buildable area and a buildable area with rather severe angles rather than the rectangular ones that are required for any modern lot. If the variance were to be granted, the Rosanskis recognize that they have to obtain a building permit within 6 months and construct then obviously what would be permitted. For all of these reasons, the Rosanskis do ask the board to grant the requested 5-foot variances to the front and rear yard setbacks. At this time, I'm going to ask Mr. Rosansky, Brad Rosansky, and I don't believe he's been sworn in yet, but I'll ask him if what I stated, if he's familiar. First, I'm going to ask if he's familiar with the property and the application. Are you, Mr. Rosansky?
Yes.
And was the application as it was presented by myself accurate and true?
Yes.
Let's go ahead and, Mr. Hutt, let me interrupt you. Let's go ahead and swear Mr. Rosansky.
Certainly.
Mr. Rosansky, do you affirm that the testimony you're giving today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And he has, for the record, he has just confirmed that the application as was presented by me, the information and facts in there were true and correct. And that concludes our presentation at this point. Myself and the Rosanskis and Mr. Warner are certainly welcome any questions that the board may have.
All right, so we're at the point of the hearing today where we're going to have some questions. I have a few questions for you, and so let me get started. Mr. Rosansky, I know you want to build a house on this property. Is it your plan to live there, or is this going to be a weekly rental unit?
No. If you knew us, we don't rent out houses that we stay in. It would be a vacation home for us. No plans at all to ever rent it.
Do you have any? So I know that you provided a drawings of a house, but that's not a house that you plan to build there, right?
Well, let me go backwards. When we bought the lot, that was a house that was designed to go there.
Okay.
And then, unfortunately, we had some family tragedies when we bought it. We lost my dad and Kathy's dad within 6 months of buying the lot. And so, of course, our lives went on hold. And then Rehoboth put in the rezone. We were ready to start going. So everything just got put on hold at that point. So that's sort of where we are with it.
So that plan is not the plan that you envisioned for this lot.
Well, that plan isn't, we love the exterior of that house, but I think that house is a little tiny bit too big now based upon the current zoning. But that's the type of architecture that we love.
All right. So you don't have a plan for this house at the present time, do you?
No, because truthfully, to invest $20,000 to $30,000 at this point was a large expenditure just to roll the dice on the hearing. If that would make the difference of getting approved, we could certainly discuss that. And just, I know you're asking the questions. I just want to say one thing is, we're looking for some equity here. And it was interesting reading the neighbors' comments, and we're just looking to build a proper sized house that will fit on the lot. And unfortunately, the down zoning changed all that. And we don't believe the code ever took into account an odd shaped lot.
Okay. Is there an agreement as to what the FAR permits for this lot?
I'm going to say that in the other way, Mr. Capone, and say there's no disagreement as to what the FAR, I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I don't believe that there's any disagreement.
I think it's 3,227 square feet. Does
Correct.
anybody differ with
That's
that?
correct.
Okay.
3226 is what I got.
All right. 3,226 square feet. Is there any reason why have you been told that you can't build a house on that lot that contains 3,226 square feet?
No, I don't think, and that was what I was trying to emphasize during the presentation, Mr. Capone, is it's not that it's impossible to design a home to fit within the building envelope. Although I note that 3,226 square feet of FAR that's available, the question is the shape of it and basically the buildable area on the ground. Because of course the 3,226 could be absorbed through separate levels throughout that house. And so the difficulty is that with the angles and the reduced buildable area, the building envelope essentially of that property, that's what creates the difficulty.
Now, I believe the back part of this house is only going to be 11 feet wide. And the thing I would like to reiterate is that we don't affect one neighbor. There are no neighbors to the right. And we're just, again, want to build a more rectangular house.
Okay. So looking at the design that you provided, which I understand is no longer the design, it occurred to me that you were trying to maximize the view of Silver Lake. Back when I looked at that design, I thought I was looking at the front of the house, which was the side that faces Silver Lake. But wouldn't you agree that you could use that the northeast corner, there's a right angle corner there, and acquire more square feet? You understand my question? Maybe that's better directed to the engineer.
So I'm not a design professional, so if Mr. Warner has any thoughts on that, I would invite him to respond to that question. And I'm not sure I understood your question. Could you go, when you said the right angle, Mr. Capone, which part of the lot were you talking about?
The north west corner of the property.
North.
No, I'm sorry, the northeast corner of the property, along Prospect Drive.
So
What is the question? I'm unclear on the question.
If you reoriented the house to take advantage of that angle, wouldn't you improve the opportunities to build a more normal house and still achieve the square footage, the maximum square footage?
Potentially. I don't know until we were to get into the design of it, to be honest.
Well, if we're talking, if to get a variance, the variance has to be practical as opposed to theoretical. And if we don't know what the design is and how the house is going to be situated on the lot, aren't we talking about theoretical problems instead of practical problems? And isn't that the standard that we have to use?
No, I would take a different view of that, Mr. Capone, and that is that those difficulties arise irrespective. And those are those difficulties I walked through at the outset, that regardless of what is ultimately designed there, whoever puts a house there, the Rosanskis, as they design this, they're impacted. It's not theoretical. They have a 15-foot yard setback and on both the front and rear, which again, in this case, the rear is more like a side than a rear. But it's treated functionally as a rear yard setback. And that's why it's not theoretical. It is actually a practical impact.
Well, it doesn't practically affect the size of the house in terms of square footage. It is possible to build a house that meets.
Oh, no.
Yes or no?
You'd have to could you restate that question?
To me, it seems that that if you can build a house, if it's possible to build a normal house that comes close to the FAR on this property, aren't we talking about a theoretical? How is that not theoretical?
No, I think that's where the evidence that was presented and the information about the code shows that those angles and the reduced buildable area, they don't render it impossible. You're not going to hear an impossibility argument, but they make it exceptionally practically difficult to construct a normal home on that lot.
So then, you know what, you asked Mr. Janis about one of his definitions. So why would a house be abnormal on this lot if we maintain the setbacks? What's your definition of a normal house? And why would it be a normal house?
The more traditional design that you would have would be probably rectangular and not come to sharp angles and not have very narrow sections that are the main part of the house. As you can see, the building envelope narrows down significantly and rapidly because of the trapezoidal shape of the lot. That's also why you have the reduced building envelope, is because, of course, you don't have the bulk that you have when you have a rectangular building envelope.
Northeast corner. All right, could I address Mr. Warner here? Is that you, Mr. Warner? This lot, do you think that you could pick up additional square footage by building into that corner at the northeast corner of the property, the right angle there? Do you
The
understand my?
witness has not been sworn, Mr. Capone.
Okay. Mr. Warner, do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
You understand my question?
Yeah, I mean, what I can say is that, maximizing the footprint of the home is to meet the FAR on this lot under the lot coverage and the setbacks that are currently in place is more difficult than it would be for a standard lot. It's a more difficult design application without question. Now, whether it can be achieved or not, as David said, is not saying it's impossible. What I'm saying is it's a more difficult design effort.
Okay, so you know what? But I think the last part of your answer was important, but I missed it. So could you repeat that, please?
Basically, what I'm saying is that this lot, under its current setbacks, is more difficult to achieve the FAR than it would be for a standard 50 by 100 lot, in my opinion.
And why is that?
Because of the reduced square footage of the buildable area and of the geometry of the lot. It's a more difficult design challenge than maximizing it on a rectangular lot of 50 by 100 lot.
Let me ask you this. Have you been given any instructions by the applicant about how he wants the house situated?
We have not ventured into a design with our firm, no, sir.
Okay. I don't have any other questions for now. Does anybody else have a question? Barry?
Yeah, Jerry, I have a lot of questions. So we established 3,226 square foot. Is it the intention to build a house to that size, to the maximum?
Again, I think that the intention of the applicant would be, I'm looking at some heads nodding, I think would be to come close to that. I don't know that it's going to be that, it's going to be 3,226 square feet. But
and where does the applicant plan to place the front door of this house? On Prospect or on Lake? Again, the code does not specify where the front door is.
I'm getting sort of looks that they're not certain where the front door will be placed of the house. You can see some potential places on those older plans. Again, they're not what's being built, but those plans.
They're not sure. Okay, well, let me ask the question. Was there an intention to put a front porch, or will there be an intention to put a front porch onto this house?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm just updating my notes here. This one is I'm going to jump back and forth to Matt. Can you define what you meant by robust? Again, I had that question when David mentioned that. What did you mean by that?
Let me respond to that if I could, Mr. Brandt. So our view is that, given the configuration of the lot, there's some homes that can be built at some degree of FAR. If you increase or decrease the setbacks, then it's almost certainly that you could build a home to the FAR, which would be a more robust house than you could possibly build given the current configuration.
Okay. Thanks, Glenn. And this one is, I guess, maybe to Doug. I looked at this, and I'm going to expand where Jerry was going. But as I looked at this, the difference in the front and the side is a difference of 2 feet. And I kept looking at this plan, and I keep thinking about streetscapes. How we want the streetscapes. And if I lived on Prospect, I don't think I would want to look at the side of a house. And I thought, well, geez, why can't we make the front of this lot Prospect? It's a difference of 2 feet. And if you did that, all the requests that Mr. Warner was putting in there seem to start falling into place. The only difference would be the south side, which would come in deeper, 15 foot off the south property line, which then achieves a fatter trapezoid, which would then probably give you, the 86 square feet of buildings spot, you would easily achieve that in this design. So my question, I guess, is to the city and to the applicant, did you guys discuss, a variance or a request on the definition of the front? And my question is to Fred. I don't know whether that can be asked of, but it does make a more desirable, puts the streetscape, puts the front door on Prospect, makes things start falling into place. That's what I couldn't figure out, if that was ever discussed. It was never mentioned. So it's an open question to inspector,
Yeah, I don't believe it was, Mr. Brand.
Okay, well, to Mr. Hutt and Mr. Warner, can that be assessed? I mean, the things start falling into place if you ask for a variance on the definition. It's a difference of 2.3 square feet, linear feet.
That is the difference. It is 2.39. The frontage difference between Prospect and East Lake is the 2.39 feet. Yeah, that's correct.
I mean, the only thing I don't like about that, I mean, I'll be honest, I played around with this, is it does bring the side much closer to Lake Drive, which, that bothered me. And then while I'm thinking it, listening to Jerry's statement, where I thought maybe Mr. Capone was going, was why didn't the applicant simply ask for a variance to one side, to the east side, and leave the west side alone? Again, being more, nicer for the streetscape. I'll put it that way. The two options I'm asking.
Yeah, Mr. Brandt, I would pipe in here and say that I don't believe that there's anything about this application which would be frustrated by your proposal. In other words, I think that some kind of modified approval or an approval could establish new setbacks, which could sort of comport with your approach. So I don't think we're somehow unable to look at it in that way, based on the way the application was filed.
I understand I could not be looking at it that way today, but again, that was my commentary. But it sounds like it has not been considered.
If we could get the porch on load.
Okay,
Barry, you have more questions?
That's where you want the porch.
They are my questions. Thank you, Jerry.
Okay,
I'm done.
no crosstalk, please. So Barry, are you done?
I am done. Thank you.
All right. Do any other members of the board have any questions? No. Lou, do you have any questions?
I have a comment, and it might be a question. I understand this is an irregular shaped lot relative to other lots in Rehoboth, but it's also my understanding with the change in the building code that with the setbacks, that many lots that are oversized, that are rectangular lots, but they're oversized, face many of the same issues that this lot faces with that you can't build the same size lot. When the lot is more than 50 feet wide, you run into a lot of the same issues that are relative to this. Not the geometry of it, the shape of the lot, but you have those same issues. Now, and nobody's saying that the code is going to get changed. My concern is if we just granted a variance on this, as far as the setbacks, I don't think and maybe some of the things that Barry and Jerry brought up might help, but I hadn't thought that through like that. I think it would be unfair to other people who had to build different shaped houses on rectangular lots just because their lot was more than 50 feet wide, because their setbacks do change when the lots are more than 50 feet. So it's a question and a comment or a concern.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody follows what I just said either.
All right, well, I think we followed it, but we're not, there are no follow-up questions there.
Well, what would concern me if we just granted a variance as they asked for it, I don't think it would be fair to other property owners that have oversized lots. I understand this is different too, that it's an irregular shape, oversized lot. But I think some of that would get taken care of based off of the comments that you, Jerry, and Barry had about asking for a different kind of, perhaps a different kind of variance.
Okay.
Mr. Capone, may I respond to that?
You sure may.
In response to that, I think the difference in this application and those other ones that Mr. Katz was referring to is that you've coupled that with an irregular shape of the lot, and that nobody is seeking to build a bigger house. It's not unfair to a person who has 5,280 square feet and 56 feet of frontage. If they have the rectangular 4,000 square foot rectangular shape within their lot, then they're building the same thing. What's happening here is the design of this house is not going to be a traditional design. You're going to end up with a very irregularly shaped house. And again, not a bigger house. And so you haven't created something where somebody says, well, my lot was a rectangle, but it was wider than 52 and a half feet. So I didn't get the same thing. They actually are getting the same thing. They just don't have the disadvantage of having that trapezoidal shape in addition to the reduced building envelope.
Okay. If there are any other questions from the group, and if there are no other questions from the group, then I think we're ready to go into correspondence regarding this issue. Madam Clerk, did we receive any correspondence about this case?
Yes, you have. You have 5 emails and 1 letter.
All right. So let me go through what I have. And now I understand that the Legrees, or at least one of the Legrees, has signed on to speak today. Is that true?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to not read their letters, and I'm going to ask them to read their letters into the record. But I'll take care of the other one. Looks like we have an email from Morgan Burns, and I'll read that into the record. This is dated November 19th, 2019. Hello, I am emailing on behalf of Louis Jr. and Louis Capano III in regard to the request for variances to section 27-24 and 270-25 to allow both front and rear setbacks to measure 10 feet on the Rosansky lot. Our residence is located at 1 Queen Street. We cannot attend the meeting on November 25th, but have no objections to the adjustment of the front and rear setbacks to the property. Thank you. Morgan Burns for Stephanie Johnny, Senior Executive Assistant, Capano Management. So that's one letter. Then I see we have a letter, an email November 20th from Jay and Enid Legree. I'm going to hold off on that, let them read that if they choose to. Then we have an email on November 25th, 2019 from John Bish. And he says, Dear Ms. Womack, please, he says this, setbacks and front setbacks in particular are a primary criteria in jurisdictions where design review board approval is required for streetscape compatibility. Rehoboth Beach's zoning requirements, in essence, produce the same outcome of consistent setbacks on our streetscapes. This subject property fronts on Silver Lake, and as such, I consider the request to allow for construction only 10 feet from the lot line abutting Lake Drive along Silver Lake to be grossly objectionable. As the property owner and neighbor to the subject property, I find it grossly objectionable as it would obscure the sightlines of Silver Lake along Lake Drive. As a citizen of Rehoboth Beach, I find any exceptions to setbacks to be objectionable to the overall streetscape goals of the zoning application. I see no hardship present present that warrants this property's exception to the code. It would present an uneven application of the code and set a precedent for any property owner desirous of a larger building footprint to request the same exception to the code. Sincerely, John Bish, 96 East Lake Drive. Then I see an email received on August 21st, 2020 from Sam Wilson. And this is what he says. I am the owner of 10 Queen Street, a neighbor of the subject lot. I am not approving the variance request for the subject lot. When my home at 10 Queen Street was built, the owners elected to not maximize the size of the house they could have built with the old ordinance. In fact, it was essentially built in line with the new ordinance. The ordinance was changed, but now I cannot add a porch on the west side of my house to take advantage of the view of Silver Lake and shade some of my western windows could have been included in the original design. I respect the new ordinance and believe everyone should do the same equally. My home in Fort Lauderdale is on a pie-shaped lot. My home is designed in a V shape and provides large windows oriented towards the views. I see no attempt of the design of the subject home to fit the odd-shaped lot. I suggest they make such an attempt before asking for a variance. I don't see that a home built with the current setbacks would be unfeasible or smaller than the homes in the neighborhood. I don't see any hardship. If you choose to approve their variance request, I ask that it is only approved for the current owners, parentheses, cannot be sold, close parentheses, and only available for a limited time. Perhaps the permit must be approved in 1 year and construction completed within 2 years. Thank you for your consideration and your service to our community. Sam Wilson, 10 Queen Investment LLC. Now, I think that covers it. Am I right, Ann?
You are correct.
Okay, so that's the general correspondence. Does anybody want to respond to any of the correspondence that I've just read into the record?
No.
No. All right. Is there any public comment on this hearing? This would be the time.
All right. I have 3 people signed up: Frank Cooper, Jay Legree, and Tom Evans.
Okay. So let's
Mr.
start
Legree
with,
is not on the call.
not on the call. Let me go back and read the Legree's correspondence then. All right, here's the email from the Legrees dated November 20th, 2019. Please forward this correspondence to members of the Board of Adjustment concerning variance request for property located at the corner of East Lake Drive and Prospect Street, requested by Rosansky. Rehoboth Beach, Delaware is a very successful city by all measures. All successful cities utilize code change for safety, good order, to advance the vision of the city. A real estate investor who purchased property in our city understands the dynamics of code change and accepts the risk. The best way to mitigate the risk is to improve the real estate property. That has not been done in the years since the applicant purchased the property. We are against the applicant's request for a variance and recommend that the property owner build a structure that is code compliant. Enid Legree and Jay Legree. And then they sent one more letter. Let me find it. Here it is. This is dated August 14th, 2020. My property at number 7 Prospect faces 100 East Lake Drive, which was sold to Bradley and Catherine Rosansky a number of years ago. Since they bought the property, they have shown little or no interest in it. It has been a neighborhood eyesore littered with cans, bottles, food containers, and trash in general. Over the years, because I have to look at it, I have picked up the trash outside the fence. I have also mowed the grass and weeds on that corner lot because, left unmowed, people will leave and toss even more trash. The area inside the fence has been beyond my scope. For the past several years, a yard crew has cleaned it up annually, usually in August or September. The men mow down the weeds, but never bother to clean up the bottles and cans. 2 weeks ago, the trash suddenly disappeared, perhaps in anticipation of this variance request. 100 East Lake Drive is a beautiful lot facing Silver Lake, but it has an unusual shape. The Rosanskis knew that when they bought the property. There is no reason to grant variances now to allow both the front and rear setbacks to measure 10 feet on the lot. Hardship is not a consideration. They have received offers of several $100,000 more than they paid for the property. Their total lack of interest in the lot makes one wonder why they now want to build a house on East Lake Drive and what kind of house they envision. They should comply with the code. Regards, Enid LeGree. That concludes the reading of the letters submitted for this hearing. Does that make anybody want to comment?
No.
Okay. So then where are we now? We are, I think we're at the point where we're going to have to decide this case.
There's public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry about the public comment. So who do we have for the public comment?
Frank Cooper.
Frank Cooper. Let's hear from Frank Cooper.
Yes, you need to swear me in.
Yes. Mr. Cooper, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, sir.
Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, sir.
Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
Yes, I am familiar with this, intimately familiar with this application. I have spoken to the Rosanskis about it. I also spoke to the other neighbors about this, and including the house immediately adjacent to it, belonging to Kevin Ty. And during this process of discussing this, first off, I thought that the idea, and I told them that I absolutely could not support these blanket setback changes. That this to me seemed like an odd approach to this. That if they had in fact submitted plans for a particular house that somehow injected itself into the setbacks, and that house followed the spirit of the law, and which decided for these setbacks and was streetscape friendly, was an attractive house, that I could support that particular design. And in those discussions, they produced the set of design, which they are now kind of backing away from. And I thought that that design was perfectly legitimate and that I would very much approve of that. But there's a couple of things that bother me about this. First off, the arguments about the shape of the lot being a deterrent, or a disadvantage, were certainly the same when they bought the lot. I mean, the setbacks have changed, but setbacks changed for everyone. So everyone is disadvantaged by the setback change if you look at it like that, and everybody's advantaged by the setback change. But the shape of the lot has not changed. So they knew that there was going to be difficulties in designing a house. It would be more of a design challenge to begin with. And I thought that the design that they had done, that is submitted not as a design, but just a characterization of what they're doing, was very good. And I told them I would support that. And the other neighbors might, and I would advocate the other neighbors support that. But absent any design, I think this is really kind of an absurd ask. I mean, they're just asking to change the setbacks, and there's no guarantee of what they're going to build. They're saying, well, we'll build something that's, compatible, and we're not going to ask for this, and we're not doing that. But that's all just hearsay, and none of that is part of none of that would be legally binding. And so I have a big problem with just granting blanket setback changes. If they were to come before the board with a set of plans, which would be a more normal way of doing it, and saying that we've designed this nice house and that it requires these variances, then the board should look at that for what it is and for what the public is going to get, and make a decision based on that. But I just cannot, as much as I like the Rosanskis, I welcome them as neighbors. I just think that they're going about this in the wrong way, and that what they're asking for is fraught with I'm not accusing them of doing anything nefarious, but the fact is that another family crisis and they decide to sell this lot to someone else. These variances have been granted. You don't know what the next people are going to do. I mean, that's the problem with what they are asking for, is that it's a blanket setback change. And that just opens the door for all kinds of things that the public might not like, and that the board might not have approved. Were you to be, presented with those facts or that design or whatever happens to it. So I would hope that the board would not approve as submitted. Now, the design that they, at my behest, they gave a set of drawings that they had done, which I believe is an exceptionally good design. I had an issue with Mr. Brandt's idea of changing the orientation of the lot from Prospect Street, from East Lake Drive frontage to Prospect Street. I think that the streetscape on the lake is as or more important than the frontage on Prospect Street. That the fact is that this becomes iconic and viewable from many places in Rehoboth Beach and from outside of the city. I mean, this is part of the shoreline. So that's an incredibly important, and I don't think that having a side of the house on that is more desirable than having a side of the house on Prospect Street. The design that they submitted had a lovely porch on the end facing Prospect Street, which I think would be, the best that we could hope for, really. There's a porch, and it's sort of a hexagonal, semi-hexagonal shaped gazebo-like structure that would be very attractive, and I don't see any problem with that. So if they were to submit the plans that they had drawn, I would be here advocating strongly that you approve those. As it is, I strongly disapprove of the application as applied for. So that's my position. I don't know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Any questions? Thank you. Who's left? Tom Evans?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
All right. Tom Evans, do you,
yes.
affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I affirm so, Jerry. Thank you. Unfortunately, I have 2.5 pages, but I'll cut it because many people have said other things. And I got to remember to come back to the best last. But just so I'm just saying, I was chair of Board of Adjustment for 20 years. And many of the things I say have been by my experience over those years. To David Hutt, this is not the only unusual lot in Rehoboth Beach. It may be the one you're representing now, but many more will come because there are many, many, many weird lots, maybe not as weird as this one. I also would reaffirm things that other people have said, that the applicant who is applying for an area variance has not met the burdens of this exceptional practical difficulty, primarily because the applicants have purchased a weird lot. And as a person who buys lots, one should know that the peculiarity of a lot determines what you can do with a lot. And one who does not pay attention, remember that caveat emptor, that it's buyer beware. And I am sympathetic to that, by the way, and I've never bought a weird lot in my life for that reason, because not only do you buy a pick and a poke, something that is difficult to build on, but it may change over time, and it never changes in your favor by my experience. I'm getting there, Jerry, don't worry about it. The restrictions that have been applied through, what was that green, what was that blue thing? The restrictions that are applied to this property are not extreme and allow the applicant, as Frank has said, to build a very nice house, maybe with lesser variances, but still, when you buy a property that's unusual, one knows that you're going to be restricted, and one knows that they're going to be more restrictive over time, and that if you don't build in time, that you may not be able to build what you want to build. And that is difficult for anyone who is invested in property, particularly expensive property. And finally, I'll just say that it ultimately, two things. One, that I always said that it is not the job of the Board of Adjustment to redesign on the fly property for the applicants. I would say that again today. While it's nice to do that for them, it's not something the board should do. Currently, it's premature to pre-approve, literally, an unknown construction project for a property that has not yet been built. So that is not something that I think is in the purview of the Board of Adjustment, and I think the majority of you already understand that, but I want it on the record, and that I would admonish Fred Townsend to please advise his board not to try to redesign on the fly. I was told that every day anybody ever did it on my board for 20 years. And it only conflicts with what's the streamlined process, because we can wish and hope and all try to help the applicant, but ultimately it's their decision what they put before the board. And with that, I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Yeah. All right, that concludes the public comment. And now we're at the point where we're going to decide this case. Fred, you have something to say?
Just very briefly, if I could reiterate your initial comments. And we've heard a lot of testimony in this, but for the board, again, there are the 4 factors that you mentioned, Mr. Capone, that are your consideration. And I would ask the court or ask the board members to apply those 4 conditions and to state the basis as best they can for their holding. Again, they are to consider the nature of the zone, the nature of the character of the immediate vicinity, whether the requested relief seriously affects neighboring properties, and lastly, whether there's an exceptional practical difficulty faced by the owner who's must be attempting to make more improvements to the property. We heard a lot of testimony about things that go beyond those 4 considerations, and I would ask the board to restrict their efforts to these 4. Thank you.
Okay. So, you guys want to kick it around some more, or does anybody feel that they're ready to make a motion in this case?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
This is the applicant. The one question that we had, we were discussing here is Mr. I think it was Mr. Brandt who suggested a different approach. And I know Mr. Townsend commented on it, but I think I might have been otherwise engaged at that moment. So is that part of the consideration or not?
Fred, I'll let you take that one.
Well, I think that the setbacks are what's being considered. So whether you call them the front yard setbacks or the side yard setbacks or the rear yard setbacks, I think there's an application to adjust the setbacks, and I think it's not important to consider whether it's the front or the side. So I think you can do whatever it is that Mr. Brandt is proposing, and you can vote to grant the appropriate relief if he in fact is proposing something.
I don't know that he was.
No, I am not proposing.
And I wouldn't, and I also would add that we're not talking about designing anything or as well. I mean, I do agree with Mr. Evans' comments there. We're not redesigning anything, but you are looking at these setbacks and you have the authority to grant relief from these setbacks.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that, Fred and Jerry. My comment was about the investigation. And again, I expressed to, and again, as to Tom's point, not designing on the fly, but I was trying to draw out in the conversation whether these things were considered, other things were considered, and I came up with looking at the material, 2 other considerations, and they weren't. So I was just making that comment to see how deeply this was investigated. So I am not making any kind of request to design on the fly. I agree with that. So it is as it's written here.
And Mr. Hutt may want to be heard from further on this, it sounds like.
Is that true, Mr. Hutt?
I mean, I think I understand where that is now, but I think it makes certainly a large difference what's considered the front and the rear of this, and what, where those variances are sought. So,
Well, it may make a difference, but it's not as far as I'm concerned, that's not the issue that we're addressing today. We came in with your petition to change front and rear yard setbacks, and that's what we're going to do. So, is there a motion?
Jerry, I'd like to try to make a motion here. I'm going to make a motion to deny the variance application as submitted. To me, the lot does not present an exceptional practical difficulty. Item number 4 on the quick check. And for those reasons, I don't think, a nice house can be designed. And again, I want to point out Mr. Cooper's comment. It would have been better to see the house plans, and if it was sticking over an inch or two, we could have made a decision, but it's not. We don't have that. And it does carry with the lot, not with the owner. So for that reasons, I'm going to make a motion to deny the variance application.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. So we're going to vote on that now. But again, so when we cast our votes, we have to support it with our reasoning. So I'm going to start with you, Barry. And
okay.
So how do you vote in favor? And
I vote in favor of my denial to approve the application due to not seeing an exceptional practical difficulty, and in addition, house plans on that lot, as submitted, would have been of great assistance. So I have to vote to deny.
Lou.
I second it, and I agree with what Barry is saying, because I did not see any evidence, since there is no building design, that they couldn't do what was asked. It was too broad of approval for us to just change the setback. So I agree with what Barry said.
Well,
I agree with what Barry and Lou says as well. It seems to me that the applicant purchased a non-conforming lot. When doing so, one needs to perform his and her due diligence, what can and cannot be built, as well be aware that there may be codes changes. It seems that the allowance would not even offer any major addition of buildable square footage, and I don't see an architect who have any problem designing a residence here. And again, I don't see the practical difficulties. So the denial of the variance would not create a hardship.
Okay. And now it's my turn to vote. I also am going to vote to deny this variance request. And I'm going to base it primarily on the fourth factor in quick check, which says whether failure to remove the restriction would create exceptional practical difficulty for the owner in relation to the owner's effort to build the property he would like to build on this lot. But our case law goes on and says that this standard is satisfied only when the difficulties alleged by the owner are practical rather than theoretical, and exceptional rather than routine. And the problem for the applicant in this case, it seems to me, is that the applicant has come before the board here, and even before the neighbors, with no plans, firm plans to build a house. So to me, that is clearly a theoretical problem. I think that they would have been better off being able to show us plans and explain why these plans could not be built any other way. And then we would have a much better idea of what they were talking about. But the way it was framed today, this was a theoretical exercise we were engaging in. And the courts tell us theoretical doesn't cut it. It's got to be practical. And therefore, I have to vote to deny this motion. So I am afraid that the motion is denied for nothing. Yes, sir.
So the motion to deny is approved, just for the record, right? The motion carries is the declaration by the members.
Right. So that pretty much concludes the meeting. I would like to say a couple of things. I mean, we all live in a beautiful town, and if I was to drop a pin and the part of Rehoboth that is probably the most beautiful part. The pin would be pretty close to where this property is located. You folks live in you have a beautiful property. I'm sure there's going to be a beautiful house there someday in the not too distant future. And it's not only important to have a beautiful house and a beautiful place, it's important to have good neighbors and good relations with your neighbors. And I hope that nothing that transpired today will affect any of the good relationships you have now or may have in the future with your neighbors. And I look forward to welcoming you to the community when the house there is finally built. So thank you very much for participating today. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
All
Second.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.